Welcome back to the Destination Dream Job podcast. Today, I would like to welcome Jen Recla. She's a leadership coach, trainer, and outdoor enthusiast, and is on a mission to awaken passion, joy, and the spirit of adventure in every professional endeavor. With over 15 years of organizational development experience in leadership, coaching, and mentoring, she specializes in creating growth experiences that inspire and equip leaders to grow engaged, collaborative, and resilient teams. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Steph, for having me.
Yeah, I wanted to talk today about leadership, about how people can break into leadership, and then if they're already leaders, how they can, reclaim their time because leadership can be really busy. So, you game for those
Yeah,
topics?
I am so game for those topics.
Perfect. So, my first question is if someone is like an aspiring leader, maybe they've
Mm.
unofficially led teams before and are now looking to like move into that leadership role, what can they do in their current position now that could help them start to be seen as a leader?
Yeah, so one of the recommendations I initially have for individuals that come to me with this question is grow, learn, sign up for as many workshops as you possibly can. Internally, if your organization offers leadership development classes, courses, programming, get involved with them. Some places have cohort programs for aspiring leaders. Try to try to apply for those, sign up for those as well. Read. There are so many great books on leadership out there. Read, listen to Audible, or if you're not a big reader, then go get those apps that give you the summary of them, right? That'll give you the main points. And I'll just say a few leadership books that I recommend to individuals. One of them is called Multipliers. It's by Liz Wiseman. It's such a great book. And what I love about this book is she has specific exercises, actions you can do in the back of the book. Another book that I think is really great is called The Coaching Habit. Makes
That
you a
is a
great
great book.
coach. Yeah, and it's something that you can practice whether you're in a formal or informal leadership role. And then getting back to reclaiming time, first things first, it's an oldie but a goodie. It focuses, it's a Covey book. It focuses specifically on habit 3 of the 7 habits of highly effective people. But that just changed my whole outlook on my relationship with time, my mindset around time. So those are 3 books that I would recommend. Get a mentor. If your organization doesn't have a formal mentorship program, go out and ask who is a leader that you admire, whether it's in your organization, outside of your organization. Set up an informational interview just to get to know you. And then tell them what your goals are, what you're trying to strengthen, and ask if they'll mentor you. Ask if they'll meet with you for coffee once a month or once every other week and help you build your leadership skills. So, getting yourself constantly developed and growing in that space. And then the other thing I would say is to go look for volunteer opportunities to lead. So, it's whether it's raising your hand to lead a project or a new initiative, even if it's scary, because that's where you're going to grow is when you're uncomfortable. Go lead a committee, join an advisory board, and work your way up to a leadership position, or look for local networking groups in the area and volunteer for their board. Volunteer to take a leadership position because one of the challenges I hear from aspiring leaders is I'm applying for these roles, I'm trying to get this promotion, but they want leadership experience. Well, how can I get the leadership experience if you don't give it to me? And so I think those volunteer board opportunities, they are looking for people to join these boards. So it's just a great thing to add to your resume to show, look at this experience that I have. So those are some initial recommendations I would give to individuals that are trying to break into that leadership role.
Yeah, I love that. Those were all really great. I think that it's so important not to discount those transferable skills too. Like if you're volunteering,
Yeah.
those are still important skills. Or like if you're in a work experience where you unofficially lead a team, something like that, those are
Yeah.
still really important things to call out, when you are applying to these leadership positions.
Yeah, yeah. And I know in some organizations, you don't always have a clear path to the next step, or the next step is your boss and they're not going anywhere anytime soon. So, these, in addition to the experience and the practice, they can also just give you some energy. I'm wanting to lead people, and this is energizing to me, and this gives me this experience. And it can also, for some people that think that they want leadership, it could show them that that might not be the right path for them. And then it's much less risky because they didn't take on the role of a job where you're leading a whole team. I'm just part of this board and I'm just going to volunteer for a year. And guess what? I've realized like leadership is not the space for me. So it's just, I think it's until you're in it, you don't know.
That's such an interesting and important fact, I think, to talk about. Is I write a lot of resumes for people who, take on these leadership roles, and then they're like, "Oh, actually, I don't want to do that," and then they move back into, the individual contributor roles. And so, have you found that there's like certain qualities or traits of a good leader, or people that tend to gravitate and enjoy it more than other people?
Yes, if you are an individual that just loves the doing, I love the doing. I like getting into the work. I love checking things off my list. I like getting my hands dirty. I see people struggle with leadership more when they're in that space. I'm not saying that isn't an amazing skill to also have as a leader. I just see people struggle a little bit more. For individuals that enjoy not being in the limelight necessarily, but guiding others to be there, because when you're a leader, it's not about you being on stage anymore. It really shouldn't be about you at all. All of a sudden, it's about the team. It's about the goals that we're striving for. It's about setting them up for success and growing them. So if that's exciting to you, then leadership's a great place for you. Guiding, coaching, curiosity. You want to understand people. You want to understand how people work together, how they collaborate well. You want to understand how to create a vision and a strategy. Those are all really helpful skills when you become a leader because you're no longer a technician anymore. When you move from an individual contributor, you're not the person doing the work as much anymore. That might be maybe 20% of your job. The rest of the time is managing the day-to-day operations, growing the people that are on your team, creating relationships, positive relationships with stakeholders, other leaders that you need to collaborate with, removing barriers, all of those things. So it becomes less tangible. And I think recognizing that and being okay with that is really important.
Yeah, that's interesting what you said about it being less tangible. I've never really thought about it in that way. Because I mean, like when you're a coach, that's mostly what you're doing is this type of like leadership type work, whether you're supervising someone
Yeah.
or not. But yeah, I think I also like what you said about how it shouldn't be about you at all. And I talk to a lot of people and they share that, their leadership style is very empathetic or servant leadership. And I'm seeing that a lot more than, I would have a few years ago. And I think that's great, but I'd love to hear what you think that means and how it's effective.
What it means to be an empathetic
Yeah, or
leader.
servant leader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For a servant leader. Yeah, there is a quote in that multipliers book, and I'm not going to get it exactly right, but the crux of it is to be a good leader, you're the smartest person in the room. To be a great leader, you make other people feel like they're the smartest person in the room. And that, when I read that, I was like, oh, that's so good. Yes, that's really what it's about. It's no longer about me. It's all about you, and all the people that are part of this team right now, really elevating and lifting them. So I think when it comes to being a servant leader, being a compassionate leader, I mean, the first thing is you see people as people. You're walking into this space recognizing we're all human. The 100% that you give is not necessarily the 100% that other people give. So you have to meet people where they're at, recognizing that individuals are going to be at different levels of effort and learning at different points in their career, figuring out how to meet them where they're at, recognizing that they're human and that they're doing the best they can. So I think part of it is just entering leadership conversations with people on your team with that in mind, giving people space and grace, balancing caring about them as a human with also challenging them, but in a way that helps them to grow, to be their best, the best version of themselves. I think listening and curiosity, I'd mentioned that already. That's a huge piece of empathetic leadership. And servant leadership it's everything should be about how can I support you? How can I support you? When people make mistakes, it's not about punishment. It's not about shaming, blaming. It's asking about their perspective. What happened in the situation? How can you support them? How can we work collaboratively together to ensure success the next time around?
That kind of makes me think of like feedback. I mean, we've all had good managers and bad managers throughout our careers. I'm sure everyone has a story of each. But I just think like I'm thinking about this one manager I had specifically who was just very hands off. She was great. I mean, it was great because I was young and I didn't have to answer to anyone really. But then there
Yeah.
was no actual feedback either. So you didn't really
Oh,
know when
yeah.
you were, doing something great or not doing something great. And if you needed to improve, you didn't really know where you were. And so I'm
Yeah.
curious to hear more about that balance between like being supportive, but also pushing people to, improve and be the best that they can
Yeah.
be.
Well, I think one thing to emphasize here is giving people feedback is supporting them because it's helping them to grow. The reasons why you give feedback to people is to either reinforce what they're doing. You're doing great. I want you to keep doing this. So it's about reinforcement, or it's redirection or correction. And that is about helping them to improve, helping them to create better results for themselves, for the team, for the organization. So, you know, reframing it as feedback is support. That is something that's going to help people. And it's funny you talk about this. This is such a topic that's on my mind right now because I'm working with an executive group in an organization that's really focused on feedback culture. How do we create a positive culture of feedback where feedback is given and received productively, that it's fluid, that it's integrated in our competencies and everything that we do? And it's really important with feedback. I think there's three main components when it comes to feedback. One is recognition. So, this is the appreciation, this is the positive feedback, which we're not always great at giving consistently. And we need to ensure that when we give it to people, it's specific, it's meaningful, it's not always the same, it's tied back to goals and values, and that we're doing it in a timely way. So, I think creating some regular cadence of appreciating your staff and doing it in different ways. I would actually just put a task on my calendar every day to remind myself to recognize at least one person. It just made it a habit. The other piece is giving feedback. So there's lots of models out there on giving feedback, radical candor. There's another model, SBI, situation, behavior, impact. Crucial conversations is a model I really like. It's more about having tough conversations, but there's just some great pieces to it. So learning about these different models that are out there and using them to help give feedback. The most important piece of giving feedback is just making sure you have the right intent. It is less about the words that you use. It's more about the motive or intent behind it. I'm giving you this feedback because I want to see you succeed, because I want to support your growth instead of because you did something wrong and I want you to feel bad about it and recognize that. And then the third component of feedback, which I think is the most important and often overlooked, is about receiving feedback. We don't talk about strengthening our own ability to receive feedback. We need to do more of that as leaders with our teams because the power lies in the receiver. When I receive feedback, ultimately it's up to me if I'm going to do anything about it. And there's a book called Thanks for the Feedback that's just great. Great research by Sheila Heen and Douglas Stone, all about the triggers that come up with receiving feedback, strategies for mitigating that, getting connected to our own sensitivity around receiving feedback. So it's such an important thing to get good at, and that's what really is going to set you up for a psychologically safe environment where your employees feel comfortable speaking up without consequence. And that's where true innovation and collaboration comes from.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you just described the dream team.
Oh, right.
I would just add though, if when you get recognition and you're receiving it, go back to your desk and write it down so that when you come to me later to write your
Yeah.
resume, you're not like, I don't
Oh,
know what I've
yeah.
accomplished.
Oh my gosh, such a good point. It's funny too. I still have things on my wall. I'm looking behind me on my bulletin board. I still have little cards and notes that people wrote me from years ago. Those can be so meaningful to people. And like you said, what a great way to shine the light on your accomplishments, which is what's going to get you that next role.
Exactly. Yeah. And those are great opportunities to write things down and, keep yourself like a brag journal or a brag sheet on your
Yeah.
computer where you can write these things down. And then also when you're having a crap day, you can look back at it and be like, oh, that was like that's, those are the good times. Those are the good things that I've done even on the bad days. So
Yeah, yeah. I think that's such a good point. Another topic I've been talking to people about recently is how important visibility is in career success. It attributes to over half of your career success. So getting those cards is great, but then sharing them and making it more visible, the work that you're
Mhm.
doing it's key. Otherwise, you could be the best performer out there, the best worker out there, but if nobody knows who you are, if they haven't seen it demonstrated, it's going to be really hard to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a client the other day who, works at his organization, and he's one of the support people, and he's been getting people to write Google reviews, and every
Oh,
Google review
yeah.
mentions his name specifically. And so you can go onto this company's website, and this guy's name is just everywhere, like every single Google review. And I'm just like, that's amazing though, because it's
Yeah.
awesome. We can talk about how great we are all day, but if you can show that social proof
Yes.
of someone else saying they're really great, then that really does show your ability to, perform well in a position.
Yeah. And people want to give you those reviews. And, I've talked to people who are apprehensive about reaching out for a LinkedIn recommendation, but people want to do it. And it really doesn't take that much time. And then you can reciprocate for them. So I know it can be scary, but people want to do this.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. So once people, get into that leadership position, they're like,
Mhm.
okay, finally got this leadership job, super excited about it. What does that first, like 30, 60, 90 days, what does that look like?
Oh, yeah. So the tendency sometimes when we're brand new leaders, even if we're just new to an organization in those first 90 days, is I've got to prove myself. I have to prove this organization, they made the right decision by hiring me. And as much as we can, let that go. They hired you. You are in, and your first 30, 60, 90 days should really be about connection, connecting to the people at the organization. So, who are the people on my team? What are their interests? What are their goals? What are their challenges? You're really just getting a sense of current state and getting to know them, connecting with them at the work level, but I think also it's important to connect with them at the human level. And then, who are my peers? Let's get to know those peers. When I enter an organization, my last role, I had one on ones with every one of my peers. I met regularly with everybody on my team, and then I met with leaders in the organization. And that gave me a chance to build some trust and get a sense of who they are, what their challenges are, and what they're looking for. So do that, create those relationships, understand what the gaps are, what's working really well, and then get to know the company, be a part of as many meetings as you possibly can, again, just to get a sense of the culture. Because, right, you can have values, mission, vision written in the PowerPoint on your first day. It can be on the wall of the organization if you're working in person. But there's this underlying culture, there's these underlying norms that aren't always written down. And you learn that when you get to know the people. So I would say, try not to make too many big decisions in those first 30, 60 days until you have a full lay of the land. Because the worst thing I see is when a leader comes in and in that first month, they make all of these changes. Well, this is the way we did it at my last role. And this is the way that we did it at my last role. And then it's disruptive. The team, even if they might be the right decisions, the team feels like you don't think that we're doing a good job and you're just
Mhm.
trying to change everything, and we already have a new leader, and now you're making all of these changes, process changes that who knows if they even make sense. So taking your time, and then at the end of that 90 days you should have a plan. Here's the vision that we collaboratively came up with as a team. Here are our next steps. These are the goals that we want to accomplish in the next quarter or the next year. So by then you should have a roadmap, but it needs to be something that is built based on a foundation of you assessing current state and again, doing it collaboratively with your team.
Yeah, I think that's so important because change is hard for everyone, no matter
Yeah.
what stage you're at. And so when you come in and you take some time to understand what the team is about and get to know them. I worked at a nonprofit that had I worked there for 4 years. I had three
Mhm.
different executive directors in the time that I was there. And so you could see
Mm.
the different quality of leadership, right? There was one who did what you're
Yeah.
talking about, right? We all got together and talked about what the mission meant and what it meant to us and how we thought maybe it could change and we're all a part of the process. And then other ones who were just like, this is what we're doing and this is why. And so when you
Yeah.
feel a part of the process, your team feels more bought into the
Yes.
organization and you're more excited about your position, what you're doing.
Absolutely. It multiplies everyone's efforts. People are engaged. They want to work hard for you. They feel heard, even if you didn't take all their ideas. Just that you listened, that you were curious, that you asked questions, and you incorporated as much as you could.
Yeah, absolutely. But being a leader can also mean a lot of extra tasks, a lot of extra
Yeah.
things that you have to do, people to manage. How do and like I said, I've worked with a lot of people who've moved back to individual contributor roles because of that, and they just don't want to carry
Yeah.
that mental load. So how do you
Yeah.
think, people can better navigate that?
Especially if you are moving from an individual contributor to a leadership role, I think there's this initial recognition that I'm not a technician anymore. I'm not as much of a doer anymore. So I can't look at this job as the leadership is on top of what I was doing. It has to shift. So there are certain things that might not make sense for you to do as a leader anymore. This is
Right.
actually this isn't about strategy, it's not about vision, it's not about relationship development. It's really more task or tactical focused. That probably makes more sense to delegate to someone on the team, or it doesn't even make sense to be part of our team anymore. So I think really looking at the responsibilities that you have to get a sense of what's really a leadership management responsibility, and then what is something that does make more sense at the tactical, task based, more individual contributor level that I might need to delegate. And I'd say, let's say you're starting brand new in a role as a leader. The areas that I think are the best to get control of first are your calendar and your email, because those tend to be the things that fill up. Once we get into a leadership role, all of a sudden there's meetings all over our calendar. We can't manage all the emails that are coming in. Well, you have the space to create some healthy boundaries for you from the beginning. So block off that lunch hour for yourself. Even if you don't take lunch, just as thinking time for yourself. Maybe you block off Monday mornings and Friday afternoons so you can ease into your week, get a good sense of the lay of the land at the beginning of your week. And then at the end of the week, it's just, I have a couple of hours where I can wind down, wrap up a few things. Maybe there's some administrative things that I need to do. Block those now on your calendar while it's not full. And then with your email, batching your email is one of the things I recommend to people. There's an app called Boomerang that I like you can get for free, and it has a pause email function. So what happens is instead of your emails constantly coming in, you're getting all these notifications, they go to a folder that's hidden. You're not getting the notifications and you can do really focused work. Or if you're in a meeting with someone, you're not distracted by all those emails coming in. So those are some things I think you can establish that are more strategic, um, specific practical action that you can do. Part of this too is just really focusing more on importance instead of urgency. A lot of organizations lead with urgency. It has to be done right now. Why does it have to be done right now? Why do I have to answer this email right now? Why do I need to join this meeting that you just put on my calendar 30 minutes ago? So we don't always take a step back to say, is this really important? Does this matter? Is this going to have significant impact on the work that we're doing? Does it tie back to our goals, our values? So shifting more to importance and focusing on that first, I think is another thing that's really important as we're navigating the time. Mindset it's so key.
Yeah, I think what you said, like right at the beginning, that being a leader can't be on top of your individual contributor stuff. I
Mhm.
think that in itself is like probably the biggest mindset shift.
Yeah.
Because like you just think about it like, you could just do that task in 5 minutes, but that's not your role anymore, right? You need to be empowering your team and delegating that out rather than just taking it on, even though you could do it really quickly. So I think
Yeah.
that really resonated with me. And the boomerang thing, I'm gonna check that out. That sounds
Oh, you should.
awesome.
It's great. You
Yeah.
can schedule emails with it as well. So if I go on vacation, I might schedule a couple emails to go out in my absence. It's awesome.
Nice. That's great. Thank you. I'll
Yeah.
definitely include the link to that in the show notes as well. So if people are interested in getting to know more about you or learning, following you or getting to know your products, where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn at Jennifer Recla, or they can check out my website, jenrecla.com. I have lots of information on there, and typically offer monthly workshops on different topics as well. So I have a YouTube channel that has navigating workload. I have a recording of a workshop that I did recently. So if you want to tap into more strategies there, I have one coming up on feedback as well. But that's just something that I offer regularly, all focused on leadership skills.
Awesome. I will include those links in the show notes. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for joining me today.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Steph.